He thought it would be a normal fishing trip, but this jellyfish changed his life forever. Frank Miller pulled the heavy net in the cold dawn of Long Beach, expecting just another ordinary fishing trip to support his family. The sea was calm, but his trembling hands revealed that something different was happening that morning. That's when he saw the strangest creature in his 40 years of fishing in those waters. A jellyfish the size of a plate pulsed with intense blue light within the net, like a piece of the sky that had fallen into the ocean. Frank almost threw it back into the sea when he noticed something that made his heart stop. "What the hell is this?" he murmured to himself, moving closer to the glowing creature. Attached to the jellyfish's transparent body was a small metal plate with numbers and letters he couldn't quite understand. But he could clearly read the name of the university engraved there. University of Southern California, Jellyfish Project. Frank felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold dawn. His daughter Emily was a marine biologist. Or at least she was, before that terrible fight that separated them 5 years ago. Before he found out she was dating a woman and kicked her out of the house with words that still haunted him every night. "Emily always talked about these strange sea things," he said softly, looking at the jellyfish that continued to glow as if trying to communicate with him. The old fisherman looked around his small, simple boat. The peeling paint on the sides told the story of years of hard work, just like his calloused hands and the patches on his net. He made enough to pay the bills and help his wife Helen with her high blood pressure medication, but there was never much left over. Helen always said he was too stubborn for his own good, and she was right. For 5 years he pretended he didn't have a daughter, that Emily had chosen to live in a way he couldn't accept. But now, looking at that glowing creature, Frank remembered when Emily was little, and he took her fishing in that same spot. "Daddy, look how the sea shines when the moon reflects on it," she used to say, pointing at the waves. "It is beautiful, my daughter. One day you'll understand all the secrets the sea hides," he would answer, never imagining those words would become prophetic. Frank put the jellyfish in a bucket with seawater and decided to take the creature home. Maybe Helen would know what to do. She was always smarter than him at solving complicated problems. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The boat rocked gently as Frank rowed back to the harbor. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected on the water. It was a moment that always brought peace to his soul, but today he felt restless. The jellyfish in the bucket kept pulsing its blue light, like a luminous heart. Frank couldn't stop looking at it. There was something hypnotic about that glow, something that made him remember nights when Emily was a child, and they would sit on the porch watching the stars. "Daddy, why do the stars shine?" she would ask. "To guide us when we're lost in the dark," he would answer, not knowing that one day he would be the one needing a light to find his way back to her. When he got home, Helen was preparing coffee in the small kitchen. She was a 62-year-old woman, grey hair always tied in a simple bun, and hands that told the story of a lifetime spent caring for her family. Her brown eyes still shone with the same tenderness as when they married 40 years ago. "You're back early today," she said without turning from the stove. "Helen, I need to show you something." She turned and saw her husband carrying a bucket. She'd known that look for 4 decades. It was the same look he had when he was worried, but trying to hide it. "What did you catch this time, Frank?" He placed the bucket on the kitchen table, and Helen approached. When she saw the glowing jellyfish, her expression completely changed. "Good heavens, what creature is this?" "There's a tag stuck to it, from the university where Emily studied." The silence that followed was heavy. Helen knew exactly what that meant. For 5 years, she had kept secrets that could destroy her marriage, but that were necessary to maintain some connection with their daughter. "Frank, sit down here. I need to tell you something." His wife's tone made his stomach tighten. She only used that tone when she had important news to share. Emily never stopped working with these creatures. She just left the university, but continued researching on her own. "And there's more." Helen took a deep breath. "She's pregnant." Frank felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. The information came like violent waves, one after another, without giving him time to process. "Pregnant? What do you mean pregnant?" She and her partner, Rachel, decided to have a baby. She's already 6 months along. And you knew about all this? Helen lowered her eyes, knowing this moment would come one day. I never stopped talking to our daughter, Frank. Someone had to. She's our only child. Anger and confusion mixed in the fisherman's chest. He rose from the chair and began pacing the small kitchen, running his hands through his graying hair. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're too stubborn to listen. Because every time I tried to talk about her, you changed the subject or left the house. Frank stopped pacing and looked at the jellyfish in the bucket. The creature continued pulsing its blue light, as if trying to send him a message. She was working with these things? Is working. Emily never gave up studying marine life. She believes these jellyfish can help understand the changes happening in the ocean. What changes? Helen approached her husband and put her hand on his arm. The changes you yourself have noticed, Frank. You always come home complaining that the fish are different, that you can't find the species you used to catch when you were young. It was true. In recent years, Frank had noticed the ocean was different. Species he'd fished since childhood had practically disappeared from the area. He'd always attributed it to the increasing number of fishermen, but had never stopped to consider other explanations. Emily believes creatures like this jellyfish can explain what's happening, continued Helen. She said they're like living thermometers of the ocean. Frank looked back at the luminous creature. For the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to think about his daughter without anger. He remembered the pride he felt when she talked about her studies, how she knew the scientific names of all the fish he caught. Where is she living? In a small house in downtown Long Beach near the fish market. She and Rachel rented a simple place. And how are they supporting themselves? Helen hesitated before answering. With difficulty, Frank. Rachel works as a substitute teacher, and Emily does some work as a tour guide at the city aquarium. It hasn't been easy. The fisherman sat down heavily in the chair. The weight of the 5 lost years began settling on his shoulders. He had missed so many things. His daughter's growing belly, choosing their grandchild's name, the fears and joys of pregnancy. A grandson, he murmured to himself. A granddaughter, actually. They already know it's a girl. They're going to call her Hope. Hope? Emily said she chose that name because the child will be the hope that will light up their lives. Frank looked again at the jellyfish. The irony didn't escape him. A creature of light had come into his hands at the exact moment he discovered he would have a granddaughter named Hope. Helen, I need to return this jellyfish to Emily. Are you sure about that? He nodded, but inside he was terrified. How to look his daughter in the eye after 5 years. How to ask forgiveness for words he could no longer take back. How to explain that the fear of losing her made him push her away for good. Helen noticed her husband's inner struggle and moved closer to him. Emily loves you, Frank. She always has. Even after everything that happened, she still asks about you when we talk. What does she ask? If you're okay, if you're eating right, if the boat needs repairs, things a daughter worries about for her father. Tears began to burn Frank's eyes, but he held them back. Men of his generation didn't cry easily, especially not in front of their wives. I was too hard on her, wasn't I? You were. But you can also fix this if you want. Frank stood up and went to the kitchen window, which overlooked the sea. The sun was already high and other fishermen were beginning to return from their morning catches, normal life going on its course, while his was being turned upside down. Helen, can you give me her address? I can. But are you sure you're ready for this? He wasn't sure of anything, but he looked at the jellyfish glowing in the bucket and felt it wasn't a coincidence that it had appeared in his net just today. I think this little creature came to give me a message, he said, moving back near the bucket. The jellyfish pulsed more intensely now, as if responding to his presence. Frank extended his finger and lightly touched the water in the bucket. The jellyfish moved closer, as if recognizing he wasn't a threat. Emily always said marine animals are smarter than we think, Helen remembered. Maybe she was right about many things. Frank spent the rest of the morning mentally preparing for the meeting. He took a shower, put on his least patched-up shirt, and asked Helen to write down Emily's address on a piece of paper. "Do you want me to come along?" his wife offered. "No, this is something I need to do alone." He picked up the bucket with the jellyfish and left the house. Downtown Long Beach was a 20-minute walk from the fisherman's neighborhood where he lived. As he walked through the streets, carrying that strange creature, Frank attracted curious looks. "What's that, Mr. Frank?" asked Mrs. Dorothy, his neighbor of 30 years. "A jellyfish I found in the net. I'm going to return it to its rightful owner." Mrs. Dorothy, a woman with completely white hair and blue eyes faded by time, approached the bucket. "What a beautiful thing. It looks like a piece of star that fell into the sea. Do you think I'm doing the right thing by returning it? Mr. Frank, every creature has its place in the world. If it came to you, there must be a reason." The neighbor's simple words echoed in his mind as he continued his walk. Maybe Mrs. Dorothy was right. Maybe that jellyfish really had come to him for a reason. The address Helen had given was a small house on a narrow street near the farmer's market. It was a working-class neighborhood where the houses were attached to each other and children played on the sidewalk. Frank stopped in front of number 47 and took a deep breath. The house was painted light blue with a small porch that had pots with plants. He recognized one of the plants. It was a basil plant that Emily had always wanted to have as a child. He knocked on the door and waited. Footsteps approached from the other side, and the door opened. A woman around 30 years old, with brown hair tied in a ponytail and wearing prescription glasses, appeared in the doorway. She looked at Frank, and then at the bucket in his hands with a surprised expression. "You must be Emily's father," she said, without any hostility in her voice. "And you must be Rachel." "That's right. Please come in. Emily is in the backyard tending to some aquariums she set up to continue her studies." Frank entered the small but well-kept house. The living room was simple with a sofa that had seen better days, but everything was clean and organized. On the walls were pictures of marine animals and some diplomas. "Emily," called Rachel, "there's someone here to see you." Frank heard footsteps approaching and his heart began to beat faster. When Emily appeared in the doorway of the living room, he felt as if he was seeing a ghost. His daughter looked different. At 35, she had inherited her mother's dark eyes, but had the firm determination he recognized in his own reflection. Her round belly, 6 months pregnant, was impossible to ignore. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "Hi, Emily." They stared at each other for a few seconds that felt like hours. 5 years of hurt, wounded pride, and stifled love hung in the air between them. "What are you doing here?" she asked, still in shock. "I came to return something I think is yours," he said, lifting the bucket. Emily approached and looked inside the bucket. Her expression changed completely when she saw the glowing jellyfish. "My God, where did you find this?" "In my net this morning. It has a tag with the university's name." Emily knelt beside the bucket, momentarily forgetting her father's presence. Her hands trembled as she examined the creature. "This is a modified Pacific moon jelly. I haven't seen one of these in months," she exclaimed, with an excitement Frank hadn't seen in years. "Modified how?" Emily looked at him, suddenly remembering they were talking. "We put small tracking chips in them to study their migration patterns. This one is from the first batch we released 6 months ago." "And why do you study these things?" Emily hesitated. For 5 years, she had dreamed of the moment when she could talk to her father about her work again. But now that he was here, she didn't know if he really wanted to listen. "Do you really want to know?" "I do." She stood up slowly, her hand supporting her belly, and went to a shelf where there were several books and folders. Jellyfish are very sensitive indicators of environmental changes in the ocean. When the water temperature rises or when there are changes in the sea's chemistry, they are the first to react. "And what does that have to do with fishing?" Emily picked up a folder and showed her father several pictures of jellyfish in different sizes and colors. "Dad, have you noticed that some fish you used to catch no longer appear in the area?" Frank nodded. That was exactly what Helen had mentioned earlier. Jellyfish help us understand why. When they migrate to deeper or more distant waters, it means something has changed in the environment they knew. And can you predict these changes? We're trying. The problem is we lost contact with several colonies we were monitoring. This one you brought might give us clues about where they went." Frank looked at his daughter with admiration. Even pregnant and living with financial difficulties, she kept fighting for something she believed in. "Emily, I need to ask for your forgiveness." The words came out before he could think better. Emily stopped flipping through the folder and looked at him. "Dad, no, let me speak. I was a fool, a proud and stubborn fool who lost 5 years of his daughter's life because I couldn't accept that you're happy in your own way." Tears began to stream down Emily's face. Rachel stepped closer and stood by her partner, offering silent support. "I missed you every day," said Emily, her voice choked up. "I missed you too. And now I find out I'm going to be a grandfather, and I missed the whole pregnancy so far." Emily placed her hand on her belly and smiled through her tears. "There's still time to meet your granddaughter." "Granddaughter?" "It's a girl. We're going to name her Hope." Frank remembered what Helen had told him about the name and understood the connection to the glowing jellyfish he had found. "May I?" he asked, pointing to her belly. Emily nodded and Frank stepped closer. When he placed his hand on his daughter's belly, he felt a strong kick. "She's lively like her mother was," he said, smiling for the first time in a long while. "Rachel says she's going to be a fisher like her grandfather," Emily commented. Frank looked at Rachel, who had remained discreet throughout the conversation. "Rachel, I need to apologize to you too. I treated you poorly the last time we saw each other." "I understand, Mr. Frank. I know it wasn't easy for you to accept. It's still not easy, I'll be honest. But I'm trying to understand that you two love each other and that you'll raise my granddaughter with love. In the end, that's what matters." Emily began to cry harder and threw herself into her father's arms. Frank hugged her, feeling how much weight she had lost and how much his granddaughter had grown. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, my daughter. I always have." They stayed embraced for several minutes, 5 years of longing slowly being healed. When they separated, Frank noticed that the jellyfish in the bucket was glowing more intensely. "She's getting weak," observed Emily, turning her attention to the creature. "I need to put her in a suitable environment quickly." "What do you need?" "I have a larger aquarium in the backyard, but it has fresh water. I need seawater and some equipment from the university." "I can get seawater now if you want." Emily looked at her father in surprise. He was really willing to help. "Dad, it would be great if you could do that, but it needs to be water from where you caught her. Each region has different characteristics." Frank nodded and headed for the door. "I'll be back in an hour." When he left, Emily turned to Rachel. "Can you believe this is happening?" "I can, and I think this jellyfish came to you exactly when you needed each other." Frank ran back home, got his boat, and returned to the spot where he had caught the jellyfish. He collected several bottles of seawater and tested the temperature and salinity as Emily had taught him when she was a child. When he returned to his daughter's house, he found her preparing a large aquarium in the backyard. Rachel was helping to carry equipment that Emily had borrowed from the university. "How did you get the equipment?" asked Frank. "I called my old project advisor. When I told him about the jellyfish you brought, he got very excited and released everything I needed. They worked together to prepare the suitable environment for the creature." Frank watched Emily work and remembered how she had always been careful and dedicated to everything she did. "Ready," said Emily, after adjusting the last equipment. "Now we can transfer her." Very carefully, they moved the jellyfish to the larger aquarium. Immediately, the creature seemed more lively, swimming in circles and pulsing its blue light more intensely. "She's happy," observed Frank. "And she's going to help us find the other colonies," added Emily. "The tracker she carries is still working. If we can track their movements, we can find out where the other jellyfish have migrated to." "And will that help the local fishermen?" "Yes, Dad. If we understand why the fish are changing their habits, we can guide the fishermen on where and when to fish more efficiently." Frank sat in a plastic chair in the backyard and watched the jellyfish swimming. For the first time in years, he felt useful for something beyond just fishing to survive. "Emily, do you need help with this project?" "What do you mean?" I've known these seas for 40 years. I know where the fish used to be, which seasons were best for each species, what changes I've noticed over the years. Emily sat next to her father, her eyes shining with an excitement he hadn't seen in a long time. Dad, that would be amazing. The traditional knowledge of fishermen is key to understanding environmental changes. I can talk to other fishermen too. Old George has been fishing for 50 years. Mrs. Martha has been collecting mussels for 30 years. They must have noticed the same things I have. You would do that? Emily, I missed 5 years of your life. If I can help with your work and also get to know my granddaughter in the process, I think that would be the best way to make up for lost time. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Rachel approached them, carrying a tray with coffee and cookies. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you might be hungry and thirsty after all that work. Frank accepted a cup of coffee and noticed that Rachel had put sugar in it without him asking exactly how he liked it. How did you know I take it with sugar? Emily always told stories about you, including how you like your coffee. He looked at his daughter, surprised. You talked about me? Dad, just because we fought doesn't mean I stopped loving you or remembering you. I told Rachel about our fishing trips, about how you taught me to read the tides, about the Sundays we spent on the boat. And you never got angry hearing those stories? Asked Frank to Rachel. How could I get angry? Those stories helped me understand where Emily's passion for the sea comes from, and they made me want to meet the man who taught her so much. Frank felt embarrassed, but at the same time touched. For 5 years he had believed that Emily only held resentment toward him. Rachel, can I ask you something? Of course. Are you two happy together? Rachel looked at Emily and smiled. Very happy. Emily taught me to see beauty in things I had never noticed before, and I think I help her be more organized and practical. And what about the baby? Are you both prepared? We're nervous but prepared, replied Emily. Rachel has read every book on motherhood that exists, and I have a mile-long list of pediatricians. And financially? The two exchanged a look before answering. Frank noticed the hesitation. It's not easy, is it? We manage, Dad. My work as a tour guide doesn't pay much, and Rachel only gets substitute teaching jobs sporadically. And the pregnancy medications? The doctor appointments? We do everything through the public system. It takes longer, but we manage. Frank stood up and started walking around the small backyard, thinking. His house was simple, but it was paid off. His income as a fisherman wasn't great, but it was steady, and he had saved some money over the years. Girls, I want to help with the baby's expenses. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I'm the grandfather, and grandfathers help with grandchildren. Besides, if we're going to work together on this jellyfish project, I think we can find a way to make it financially viable too. How so? Frank approached the aquarium, where the jellyfish swam in regular circles. How many tourists visit the city aquarium every month? Lots, especially on weekends and holidays. What if we offered boat tours to show real marine life, you explaining about the creatures, me sailing and telling sea stories? Emily stood up excited. Dad, that's an incredible idea. Scientific tourism is growing a lot. People want authentic and educational experiences. And the jellyfish? Can it be an attraction? It and others we can rescue. We can create a small marine animal rehabilitation center right here in the backyard. Rachel, who had been listening, approached them. Are you serious? Because that would be a lot of work. Rachel, you're a teacher. You know how to explain complicated things simply. You could develop educational materials for the tours. And I can talk to the other fishermen to create an information network about the local marine life, added Frank. And I can use my scientific knowledge to ensure everything is done responsibly, concluded Emily. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Frank was surprised by how easily he had started communicating with his daughter again. It was as if the 5 years of separation were just a nightmare from which he had finally awoken. When the sun began to set, Frank stood up to leave. Dad, do you want to have dinner with us? Asked Emily. Not today, my dear. Your mother is waiting to hear how our meeting went. But can I come back tomorrow so we can keep planning? Sure, and Dad, thank you for returning the jellyfish and for coming back into my life. Frank kissed his daughter's forehead and shook Rachel's hand. Thank you for taking good care of each other. On the way back home, Frank felt lighter than he had in years. The sea seemed bluer, the air cleaner, and the future more promising. When he got home, Helen was in the kitchen preparing dinner. How did it go? She asked, anxious. It was good, Helen. Very good. He told his wife everything. The jellyfish project, the plans for scientific tourism, Emily's excitement, Rachel's kindness. And our granddaughter. Did you feel her move? I did. She's as active as her mother was. Helen smiled and hugged her husband. I knew you two would work things out. How did you know? Because you're both stubborn, but you're also good people. And good people always find a way to forgive each other. That night, Frank slept better than he had in 5 years. He dreamed of his granddaughter, of glowing jellyfish, and of boats full of tourists interested in learning about the sea. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual and went straight to Emily's house. When he got there, he found the 2 women in the backyard watching the jellyfish. Good morning, girls. How did she do overnight? Very well, replied Emily. And we have amazing news. What news? Emily pointed to the aquarium. Frank approached and saw that there were 2 jellyfish swimming together. Another one showed up. She reproduced overnight. Jellyfish can reproduce asexually when they're in a favorable environment. And is that good? It's great. It means we created such a good environment that she felt safe enough to reproduce, and now we have 2 to study. Frank watched the 2 glowing creatures swimming in sync. There was something poetic about that scene. 2 generations of the same species sharing the same space, just like he and Emily were finally sharing life again. Emily, yesterday I talked to some fishermen about our project. And? Old George, Mrs. Martha, and 3 other fishermen want to participate. They've also noticed changes in the sea and want to understand what's happening. Dad, this is wonderful. The more information we have, the better our research will be. And there's more. I spoke with the president of the Fishermen's Cooperative. He said he can help us get permits for the tours. Rachel approached them carrying a folder. I spent the night working on a basic business plan. I estimated costs, possible prices, target audience profile, marketing strategies. You did all that in one night? I've always wanted to have my own business. I never imagined it would be something related to the sea, but I'm excited about the possibility. They spent the entire morning refining the plans. Frank was impressed with Rachel's organization and with Emily's technical knowledge. Together, they made a very competent team. How many boats will we need? Asked Emily. To start, just mine. Later, if it works out, other fishermen can join with their boats too. And where will we show the jellyfish to the tourists? Right here in the backyard, as a visitor center. Then we can take them out to see other creatures in their natural environment. Dad, do you think tourists will be interested in this? My daughter, have you seen the look on people's faces when they see these jellyfish glowing? It's pure magic. Everyone is fascinated. As if to confirm his words, a child appeared at the backyard gate at that moment. Aunt Emily, what is that glowing? Asked the boy, about 8 years old. Hi, Tommy. They're special jellyfish we found in the sea. The boy approached the aquarium with wide eyes. Are they real? Yes, they are. And they're very important for understanding the health of the sea. Can I touch them? You can't touch them, but you can look as much as you want. Tommy stood hypnotized, watching the creatures. His parents showed up a few minutes later to pick him up, and were also fascinated. What a beautiful thing, exclaimed the boy's mother. Where did you find them? My father caught one of them, and it reproduced overnight, explained Emily. Are you going to set up some kind of exhibit? Asked the boy's father. Frank, Emily, and Rachel looked at each other and smiled. We're thinking of something like that, replied Frank. After the family left, they realized they had just made their first presentation to potential tourists. Did you see how they reacted? Said Rachel, and the boy didn't even want to leave. Children are our easiest audience, agreed Emily. They have no prejudices and get really excited about scientific discoveries. And the children's parents end up getting interested too, added Frank. They decided to do a test the following weekend. Frank would invite some friends and neighbors to learn about the project. Emily would prepare a simple presentation about the jellyfish, and Rachel would develop an educational activity for the children. During the week, they worked hard to prepare everything. Frank fixed and cleaned his boat, Emily set up a second aquarium to house more jellyfish, and Rachel created explanatory posters and educational games. Helen helped by preparing snacks for the visitors and decorating the backyard with colorful little flags. "This is starting to look like a county fair," joked Frank. "It is a celebration," replied his wife. "A celebration of our family coming together again." On Saturday morning, the first people started to arrive. Mrs. Dorothy, the white-haired neighbor, was one of the first. "Mr. Frank, how wonderful! Who would have thought these little creatures could be so important?" "It's Emily who understands these things, Mrs. Dorothy. I just fish." "Don't say that, Dad," interjected Emily. "Your knowledge of the sea is just as important as mine." Little by little, the backyard filled with people. Fishermen, neighbors, families with children, even some tourists staying in the area showed up. Emily gave a simple and engaging presentation about jellyfish and their importance to the marine ecosystem. Frank told stories about how the ocean had changed over the years. Rachel organized activities for the children to draw the marine animals they liked the most. "Now, would you all like to see Frank's boat?" Emily asked the audience. Everyone headed to the harbor, where Frank showed his boat and explained how traditional fishing worked in the region. Some people asked technical questions, others wanted to hear curious sea stories. "Mr. Frank, have you ever had any scary experiences while fishing?" asked a tourist from Los Angeles. "Not scary, but I've had a few surprises. Once I caught a giant octopus that almost capsized my boat. Another time I found an injured turtle and had to take it to the Marine Rehabilitation Center." "And how did you know you had to take the turtle to rehabilitation?" Frank looked at Emily and smiled. "My daughter taught me. Since she was a child, she said all sea animals deserve a chance to live." People seemed to really enjoy the experience. Several left their contact information, asking to be notified when there were new tours. "How much will you charge for this?" asked Mrs. Martha, the mussel gatherer. "We're still working out the prices," replied Rachel, "but we want it to be affordable for people in the community too." "Because this is our heritage," added Frank. "Everyone who lives off the sea should understand how to care for it." When everyone had left, the family gathered to evaluate the outcome. "I think it was a success," said Helen. "The children loved it," agreed Rachel. "And the adults asked very interesting questions," added Emily. "The important thing is that everyone left here knowing a little more about the sea," concluded Frank. That night they had a small celebration in the backyard. Helen prepared grilled fish, Rachel made a salad, and Emily contributed a carrot cake she had learned to make during her pregnancy. "A toast," said Frank, raising his glass of juice, "to the jellyfish that brought our family back together, and to the future we're building together. And to Hope, who will be born into a world where her grandpa and mum work together," added Emily, her hand on her belly. "And to the proof that it's never too late to start over," finished Helen. They toasted under the starry sky, with the jellyfish glowing softly in the aquariums in the background. It was a scene none of them had imagined possible just a week earlier. In the following days, the project began to take more solid shape. Frank obtained the necessary permits for the tourist tours. Emily contacted the university and secured official support for the jellyfish research. Rachel created a simple website to promote the project. "What should we call our company?" asked Rachel. "How about Jellyfish Tours?" suggested Emily. "Or Marine Adventures?" proposed Frank. "I have an idea," said Helen. "How about Project Hope, in honor of the granddaughter who's on the way and the glowing jellyfish?" Everyone agreed it was the perfect name. Project Hope officially began the following week. The first group of paying tourists consisted of 15 people, 8 adults and 7 children of various ages. Emily began the presentation in the backyard, explaining about the bioluminescence of jellyfish and their ecological importance. The children were fascinated when she turned off the lights and the jellyfish glowed like blue stars in the water. "Why do they glow?" asked a girl about 10 years old. "They glow to communicate, to scare predators and to attract prey. It's as if they have their own language made of light. And do they feel pain? Asked an older boy. Jellyfish don't have a nervous system like ours, so they don't feel pain in the same way. But they react to their environment and protect themselves when they sense danger. After the educational portion, the group headed to Frank's boat. It was a simple boat, but he had taken great care with its cleanliness and organization to welcome the tourists. "Everyone, welcome to the Sea Gold," said Frank, introducing his vessel. "This boat is 30 years old, the same amount of time I've been fishing these waters." During the tour, they spotted dolphins, different types of fish, and even some sea turtles. Frank narrated each sighting with personal stories and traditional knowledge, while Emily offered scientific explanations. "Mr. Frank, how do you know where we'll find the animals?" asked a tourist. "It's observation, ma'am. After so many years, you learn to read the signs, the color of the water, the wind direction, the behavior of the seabirds. It all tells a story." "And has that story changed over the years?" "It sure has. Some fish that were common when I was young are now rare. Others we never used to see have started appearing. That's why Emily's work is so important." At the end of the tour, everyone was delighted. Several people booked new tours for future dates and asked to bring friends and family. "Do you have any materials we can take home?" asked an elderly couple. "Yes, we do," replied Rachel, handing them an educational brochure she had prepared. "And here's our website contact, where you can follow the project's updates." When everyone had left, the family gathered to count the money collected. "How much was it?" asked Emily eagerly. "It covered all the tour expenses, and there was even a little left over," replied Rachel, doing the math. "And this was just the first group," added Frank. "Imagine when we're doing 3 tours every weekend. Dad, I think our idea is really going to work." "Of course it will work. We have a perfect combination: your scientific knowledge, Rachel's organization, my experience with the sea, and the jellyfish as the main attraction." In the following weeks, Project Hope grew quickly. Word of mouth worked better than any advertising, and soon they had a waiting list for the tours. Emily managed to rescue more injured or lost jellyfish and set up a small rehabilitation center in the backyard. Rachel developed different types of tours, some more focused on families with children, others aimed at adults interested in marine conservation. Frank trained other fishermen in the community to also offer tours, creating a cooperative network that benefited the whole fishermen's cooperative. "Mr. Frank, I never imagined I'd make money by telling fishing stories," said old George, who had joined the project. "That's right, Mr. George. We always knew these things. We just didn't know they had value for those who don't live off the sea. And the best part is that we can still fish normally. The tours are just an extra. An extra that's helping everyone understand better how to care for the sea." The project's success brought attention from the local media. A regional newspaper did a story about the initiative, and a television station sent a crew to film a report. "Emily, are you nervous about the interview?" asked Rachel on the morning of the filming. "A little. I've never been on television before. It'll be just fine. You just need to talk about what you love." "What if I stammer?" "Then you take a deep breath and remember you're doing this for hope and for future generations." The filming went better than expected. Emily was natural and articulate, explaining about the jellyfish and the importance of marine conservation. Frank charmed the reporters with his stories and traditional knowledge. "Mr. Frank, what changed in your life after you found that first jellyfish?" asked the reporter. "Everything changed, miss. I reunited with my daughter, I'll get to meet my granddaughter, and I discovered I can help preserve the ocean I've loved for 40 years. And for Emily, what does it mean to have your father as a work partner?" "It means I can finally unite 2 things I love: scientific knowledge and the lessons my father taught me about respecting the ocean." The segment aired the following week and generated a lot of interest. The phone at Project Hope wouldn't stop ringing with reservation requests. "We're going to have to expand," said Rachel, looking at the packed schedule. "But without losing quality," cautioned Emily. "What's important is that every tourist leaves here truly understanding the importance of marine conservation. And without forgetting to care for the jellyfish," added Frank. "They are our partners in this story. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing." As the project grew, new challenges appeared. They needed to hire more people, better organize the schedules, and create more efficient systems for tourist services. Emily suggested they hire young people from the community as assistants, creating job opportunities for those just starting their professional lives. Dad, what if we offered internships to biology students from the university? Good idea. They can help with the scientific part, and we teach them about the practice of marine life. And I can train people from the community to work in administration and customer service, offered Rachel. The expansion brought a new dynamic to the project. Now there was a team of 8 people working regularly, and several others who helped as needed. Among the new members was Amber, a 22-year-old young woman who had just graduated in tourism and had been unemployed for months. Amber, have you worked with ecotourism before? Asked Rachel during the interview. No, but I've always been interested in environmental conservation, and I grew up here near the ocean, so I know the area. What do you think is most important in our type of work? I think it's making people fall in love with the ocean the same way you all did. When we love something, we automatically want to protect it. Emily and Frank approved of Amber immediately. She had the necessary enthusiasm and a natural way of communicating with people of different ages. Also joining the project was Brian, a 24-year-old marine biology student who was writing his thesis on bioluminescence. Brian, what do you hope to learn working with us? Asked Emily. I want to understand how to apply scientific knowledge in a practical and accessible way. At university, we learn a lot about theory, but little about how to convey that knowledge to the general public. And you don't mind working with traditional fishermen? On the contrary, I believe the combination of traditional and scientific knowledge is the future of marine conservation. With the expanded team, Project Hope was able to offer tours almost every day, serving groups of up to 20 people at a time. The financial success allowed Emily and Rachel to move to a larger house with a spacious backyard where they could expand the Jellyfish Rehabilitation Center. Emily, are you sure it's safe to move houses being 8 months pregnant? Asked Helen, worried. Mum, the new house is just 2 blocks from here. And Rachel is taking care of everything. I'm just supervising. At least let me help with the move. Yes, you can help, especially with the jellyfish. They need to be transported very carefully. The move was done in 1 day, with the whole community helping. Frank coordinated the transportation of the jellyfish in special aquariums that Brian had designed. The new house had a backyard 3 times larger than the previous one, which allowed for a more suitable visitor center and an expansion of the research lab. Now it really looks like a professional project, commented Rachel, admiring the new facilities. And Hope will grow up in an even more beautiful environment, added Emily, stroking her very large belly. Hope's birth was expected in 3 weeks, and the whole family was anxious. Frank had prepared a special crib using reclaimed wood from old boats as he had planned. Dad, this crib is beautiful, said Emily, admiring the craftsmanship. I wanted to make something that would connect your daughter with the family's maritime tradition. She'll sleep lulled by the same woods that have sailed these seas. Exactly. Helen had prepared a complete layette, knitting blankets and little clothes during the nights. Rachel organized the entire baby room and made a detailed list of everything that would be needed in the first few months. On the eve of the birth, Emily felt the first contractions during a tour with tourists. She hid it until the end of the activity, but as soon as the group left, she told the family, "Rachel, I think the time has come." "Are you sure? Are the contractions regular?" "Yes, they are, and it hurts more than the practice ones." Frank, who was cleaning the boat, ran home when Helen went to get him. "Emily is in labor," shouted Helen. "Already? But wasn't it only next week?" "Babies don't check the calendar, Frank. Let's go to the hospital." The drive to the hospital was a mix of nervousness and excitement. Emily was calm, breathing as she had learned in the prenatal class. Rachel held her hand and timed the contractions. Frank drove with extra care and Helen prayed softly. "Dad, thank you for being here," said Emily between contractions. "I wouldn't miss this for anything in the world, my daughter. Even though I chose a different path than you expected, Emily, you chose the path of science, knowledge, and love. How could I not approve of that?" At the hospital, the labor lasted 6 hours. Frank and Helen waited in the waiting room, while Rachel stayed with Emily throughout the whole process. When they finally heard the baby's cry, Frank felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if a part of his soul that had been asleep for 5 years finally woke up. "It's a healthy baby girl," announced the nurse. 3 kilos and 200 grams. Minutes later, Rachel appeared at the waiting room door with a radiant smile. "Do you want to meet Hope?" Frank and Helen followed Rachel to the room where Emily was lying, with a small baby in her arms. The scene was one of indescribable tenderness. "Grandpa, Grandma, meet Hope Emily Miller," said Emily with tears of happiness in her eyes. Frank approached slowly, still not believing he could finally meet his granddaughter. When Emily placed the baby in his arms, he felt his heart fill with an unconditional and immediate love. "Hi, Hope. I'm your Grandpa Frank," he whispered, his voice choked. "I'll teach you everything about the sea. And I'll teach you everything about the creatures that live in it," added Emily. "And I'll teach you to read and write so you can tell these stories to other people," said Rachel. "And I'll teach you to cook so you can feed this whole crazy family," finished Helen, making everyone laugh. Hope slept peacefully in her grandfather's arms, as if she knew she was safe. Her little face already showed features that reminded Frank of both Emily and Rachel. "She's perfect," said Frank with tears in his eyes. "She's our little light," Emily agreed. That night, the family took turns holding the baby. Everyone wanted to spend as much time as possible with the newest member of the family. When Emily finally got to rest, Frank stayed watching his granddaughter sleep. "Rachel, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, Mr. Frank." "Do you think Hope will grow up happy having 2 mothers and no father?" Rachel thought before answering. "Mr. Frank, I think Hope will grow up happy because she'll have so much love around her. She'll have 2 mothers who love each other and love her, grandparents who are present, and a whole community that already considers her part of the family. And if other children say something about her family being different, then she'll learn from an early age that families are made of love, not predefined structures, and she'll know she has a strong family to support her always." Frank nodded, satisfied with the answer. Looking at his sleeping granddaughter, he realized that the concept of family had expanded greatly since he found that first glowing jellyfish. The next day, Emily and Hope were discharged from the hospital. The return home was a celebration. The whole project community was waiting to meet the baby. Amber had decorated the house with blue banners. Brian prepared a special aquarium with baby jellyfish to symbolize the new generation, and the fishermen partners of the project brought handmade gifts. "Hope, these are your sister jellyfish," said Emily, showing the special aquarium to her daughter. "They're going to grow up with you. And when you grow up, you'll help us take care of them," added Frank. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of all the celebration around her, but she seemed to smile whenever she heard her grandfather's voice. In the following weeks, the family's life settled into a new routine. Emily took maternity leave from the project, but continued supervising the research from home. Rachel divided her time between caring for their daughter and managing the tourist tours. Frank proved to be a dedicated and present grandfather. Every day before going out to fish or lead tours, he would stop by his daughter's house to see Hope. "Good morning, my little granddaughter," he would say every morning, picking up the baby. "Grandpa is going to work at sea today, but I'll be back this afternoon to tell you all the news." Hope always reacted to her grandfather's voice with happy movements of her little arms, as if she understood every word. Helen also became a constant presence in the house. She helped with the baby's care and prepared nutritious meals for Emily during breastfeeding. "Helen, you don't have to do this every day," Rachel would say. "Of course I do. Hope is my first granddaughter, and you 2 are my daughters. That's how family works." Project Hope continued to grow even with Emily on leave. Brian took over the scientific part temporarily. Amber developed new educational activities, and Frank became even more charismatic as a guide, always telling stories about his granddaughter to the tourists. "Mr. Frank, you seem more cheerful than usual today," commented a tourist. "That's because my little granddaughter turned 2 months old yesterday. She already recognizes my voice and smiles when she sees me." "Do you have a picture of her?" "I sure do," he said, pulling out his phone excitedly. "Look how beautiful she is." The tourists were always charmed by Frank's pride in his granddaughter. This humanized the tours even more and created an emotional connection that went beyond environmental education. When Hope turned 3 months old, Emily decided to return to work gradually, taking her daughter to the project a few times a week. "Hope, are we going to work today?" said Emily, preparing her daughter for the first day at the research center. "You're going to meet your jellyfish sisters." The baby seemed fascinated by the pulsing blue lights of the aquariums. She would watch the creatures with total attention, as if trying to understand their movements. "Look, she's interested in the jellyfish," observed Brian. "It makes sense," said Emily. "She grew up hearing us talk about them. She must recognize something familiar. And look how the jellyfish seem interested in her too," added Amber. It was true, whenever Hope was near the aquariums, the jellyfish would swim closer to the glass, as if drawn to the baby's presence. "Do you think they sense her energy?" asked Rachel. "Could be," replied Emily. "Jellyfish are very sensitive to vibrations and changes in the environment. Maybe they notice something special about Hope." Frank, who was watching the scene, had an idea. "Emily, what if we include Hope on the tours? Not to work, of course, but as a special presence." "What do you mean, Dad?" "People love stories about family and generational continuity. Hope represents the future, the next generation, that will care for the sea. And she seems to have a natural connection with the jellyfish," added Brian. Emily thought about the suggestion. Indeed, whenever they mentioned Hope during the tours, the tourists became interested. "We can try it," she decided, "but only if Hope is comfortable and if it doesn't interfere with the visitors' learning." The first experience was an absolute success. Hope slept peacefully in her mother's arms throughout the entire presentation, and the tourists were delighted with the idea that they were seeing the future generation of marine researchers. "Emily, will your daughter follow in your footsteps in science?" asked a visitor. "She'll choose her own path," replied Emily. "But I hope she grows up loving and respecting the sea no matter what profession she chooses." "And how will you teach her that?" "By showing her in practice. She'll grow up seeing that work can be something you love, that family can work together, and that every person can make a difference in preserving the environment." After 6 months of Hope's birth, Project Hope had become a regional reference in scientific tourism. They received visitors from various states and even some international tourists. The jellyfish research had also advanced significantly. Emily and Brian managed to map migratory routes of different species and establish correlations between their behavior and environmental changes. "Emily, we have enough data to publish a scientific paper," said Brian, showing spreadsheets full of numbers. "Really? About what?" "About how the traditional knowledge of fishermen can complement scientific environmental monitoring research." "That would be amazing. My father would be proud to have his knowledge academically recognized. And I think we should include Frank himself as a co-author. After all, he provided most of the historical data about changes in the local marine wildlife." Emily was moved by the possibility. Her father, who had never set foot in a university, would become co-author of a scientific paper. When she told Frank the news, he was speechless. "Emily, are you sure about this?" "I didn't study these things in books." "Dad, you studied through practice for 40 years. Your knowledge is as valid as any academic theory. But I don't know how to write these scientific things. You don't need to write. You just need to keep telling us what you've observed over the years. Brian and I will transform that into scientific language. What if other scientists think it's strange having a fisherman as a paper author? Then they'll learn that science becomes richer when it includes different kinds of knowledge." The process of writing the article took 3 months. Brian and Emily interviewed Frank several times, recording his knowledge about weather patterns, fish behavior, changes in marine vegetation, and other phenomena he had observed over the decades. "Mr. Frank, do you remember when you first started noticing that certain fish species were disappearing?" Brian would ask. "It was about 15 years ago. First the anchovy disappeared, which was very common in winter. Then it was the croaker, which we used to catch all the time in summer." "And do you relate that to any environmental change?" "Yes. Around the same time, the water started getting warmer, even in winter. And some different algae appeared that I had never seen before." "Can you describe these algae?" "They were darker than the normal ones and made the water a bit murky. The small fish didn't like staying near them." Emily and Brian noted everything down, cross-referencing Frank's observations with official scientific data about water temperature and algae proliferation in the region. "It's incredible how your father's observations match the data we collected," Brian commented to Emily. "He was always very observant. When I was a child, he would predict the weather just by looking at the birds' behavior and the color of the clouds." And was he right? Always. The fishermen in the area still consult him when they want to know if it's worth going out to sea. The scientific article was submitted to a renowned academic journal and accepted for publication after some revisions. When the news arrived, the whole family celebrated. "Dad, you're going to be a published scientist," said Emily, hugging Frank. "I still can't believe it." "Yes, you can. And you know what's best? Your knowledge is going to help other researchers in different regions of the country." "How so?" "They're going to use our methodology to interview traditional fishermen from other areas and compare it with local scientific data." "You mean other fishermen will become scientists too?" "Exactly. You've paved the way for traditional knowledge to be valued and preserved." The publication of the article brought even more recognition to Project Hope. They received invitations to present their work at conferences, universities started seeking partnerships, and environmental organizations wanted to financially support the research. "We need to be careful not to lose focus," Rachel warned during a team meeting. "How so?" asked Amber. "With so much recognition, there might be a temptation to grow too quickly or accept projects that don't align with our values." "Rachel is right," agreed Emily. "Our goal has always been to connect people with the sea in an educational and sustainable way. That can't change. And without forgetting that this all started with a family reuniting," added Frank. "The human part is as important as the scientific one." They decided to only accept partnerships that would strengthen local research and benefit the fishermen's community. They turned down franchise and expansion proposals that could change the project's character. When Hope turned 1 year old, the family organized a special party at the research center. They invited all the project's partners, tourists who had become friends, and the entire local community. "Hope, a year ago you arrived to light up our lives," said Emily during her speech. "And today we're celebrating not just your birthday, but everything that has changed since you were born." "A year ago I was a simple fisherman who didn't speak to his own daughter," continued Frank. "Today I'm grandfather to the most beautiful girl in the world and co-author of a scientific article. Who would have thought? And it all started with a glowing jellyfish that decided to swim into our net," added Helen. "Maybe it knew we were a family that needed to find each other again," Rachel philosophized. Hope, who was already walking with assistance and babbling her first words, was fascinated by the whole celebration. She walked among the aquariums, pointing at the jellyfish and repeating sounds that seemed like attempts at communication. "Look, she's trying to talk to the jellyfish," observed Brian. "Or they're trying to talk to her," joked Amber. Indeed, whenever Hope approached the aquariums, the jellyfish seemed to increase the intensity of their bioluminescence, creating a spectacle of lights that enchanted everyone present. "That girl is going to be special," said Mrs. Dorothy, the white-haired neighbor who had become a regular visitor to the project. "She already is special," replied Frank, picking up his granddaughter in his arms. "She's our little light who showed us the way back to what truly matters." The celebration lasted until late afternoon, with music, homemade food prepared by Helen and several other women from the community, and many stories about the year that had passed. During sunset, the family gathered on the house's porch, watching the sea and reflecting on everything that had happened. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be here, being a grandfather and working with my daughter, I wouldn't have believed it," said Frank. "And if someone told me I'd be a mother and have a successful scientific project, I'd also doubt it," added Emily. "And I never imagined I'd leave Los Angeles to live in a coastal town and work with scientific tourism," said Rachel. "Sometimes life surprises us in ways we can't even imagine," philosophized Helen. Hope, in her grandfather's arms, pointed at the sea and babbled excited sounds, as if trying to say something about the waters that glowed with the sun's reflection. "What are you seeing there, little granddaughter?" asked Frank. "Water. Jelly," said Hope. articulating one of her first clear words. "She said jellyfish," exclaimed Emily, emotional. "Our little granddaughter is already a marine biologist," joked Helen. At that moment, as if called by Hope's words, a real jellyfish appeared on the sea surface near the beach, pulsing its blue light in the twilight. "Look at that," pointed Brian. "A wild jellyfish." Everyone stood up to get a better look. The creature swam in circles close to the shore, its bioluminescence creating a natural spectacle in the darkening sea. "It's as if it came to say goodbye," said Emily, with tears in her eyes. "Or to say thank you," suggested Frank. "Thank you for what?" asked Hope, in her still developing childlike language. "Thank you for taking good care of its sisters," replied her grandfather, "and for learning to take better care of the sea." The jellyfish remained visible for a few minutes before diving back into the depths. When it disappeared, the family fell into contemplative silence, each processing the symbolism of that moment. "I think that's nature's way of telling us we're on the right path," said Rachel, breaking the silence. "And that our story is just beginning," added Emily. Frank looked at his granddaughter, who had fallen asleep in his arms while they watched the sea. "Hope when you grow up, you'll understand that life sometimes gives us gifts disguised as problems. That first jellyfish Grandpa caught seemed like a problem, but it brought our family back together and taught us to work as one. And you'll understand that each of us has an important role in preserving the world," continued Emily. "And that true love always finds a way to shine, even in the darkest waters," finished Helen. 2 years later, Project Hope had become a model of sustainable scientific tourism. They received visitors from all over the country and had partnerships with national and international universities. Hope, now 3 years old, was already a charismatic presence on the tours. She knew the names of many marine species, could explain to other children why jellyfish glowed, and had developed a special connection with all the creatures at the research center. "Grandpa, why do the jellyfish like me?" she asked one day, watching how the creatures always approached the glass when she came near. "Because you have a special light inside you, just like them," replied Frank, "and light always recognizes light." "I have light like them?" "Yes, you do. Your light is made of curiosity, love, and a desire to learn. That's why your name is Hope." The little girl smiled and placed her small hand on the aquarium glass. Immediately, 3 jellyfish approached and began to pulse in sync, creating a spectacle that never failed to impress those who watched. Emily observed the scene with the same fascination as always. Even after years of studying bioluminescence, she was still moved seeing her daughter's connection with the marine creatures. "Rachel, do you think Hope really has some special ability with marine animals?" asked Emily to her partner. "I think she grew up in an environment where these animals are respected and loved. Maybe they sense that in her," replied Rachel. "Or perhaps she carries some of her grandfather's wisdom and her mother's scientific curiosity," suggested Brian, who continued as a researcher on the project. "Either way, it's something magical," agreed Amber. The growth of the project brought new challenges and opportunities. They secured funding to expand the research center and create an educational program for schools in the region. Frank became a respected figure, not just locally, but nationally. He was invited to speak at universities about the importance of traditional knowledge in scientific research. "Dad, are you nervous about the lecture at the University of Southern California?" asked Emily the day before a trip. "A little. It will be strange for a fisherman to speak to a bunch of doctors. You have as much knowledge as any doctor. You just learned it differently. What if they ask questions I don't know how to answer? Then you say you don't know and suggest they come here to do research. Honesty is one of your greatest qualities." The lecture was a success. Frank won over the audience with his humility, practical knowledge, and engaging stories about life at sea. "Professor Frank," said a doctoral student after the presentation, "how do you reconcile traditional knowledge with modern scientific methods?" "Son, I don't reconcile anything. I just observe and tell what I see. You're the ones who turn that into science. My role is to be a witness to what the sea has taught me over 40 years. And what is the most important lesson the sea has taught you?" Frank thought for a moment before answering. "That everything is connected. The behavior of the fish with the weather with the tides with the moon with the seasons, and that we humans are also part of that connection. When we understand that, we learn to respect. And how do we pass that lesson on to future generations? By doing what I did with my daughter, and am doing with my granddaughter, taking them to the sea, teaching them to observe, and letting them discover for themselves the magic that exists there. When Frank returned from his trip, he found Hope playing in the backyard with her toy jellyfish, dolls that Helen had sewn especially for her. "Grandpa," she shouted, running to hug him, "the jellyfish missed you." "Did they really?" "Yes, they did. They were dimmer while you were away." Frank went to check the aquariums, and indeed, the jellyfish seemed less luminous than usual. "How strange," he commented to Emily. "Do you think they really sense people's presence?" "Dad, each day that passes I become more certain that these creatures are far more complex than we imagine, and Hope seems to understand them better than any of us." At that moment, as if responding to the conversation, Hope approached the main aquarium and began humming a song she had made up. Immediately, all the jellyfish began pulsing in rhythms synchronized with the melody. "This isn't normal," whispered Brian, who was watching the scene. "Define normal," joked Rachel. "Nothing in our family has been normal since that first jellyfish appeared." "And thank God for that," added Helen. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. By age 5, Hope was already actively participating in Project Hope's tours. She had developed a special presentation for children where she explained marine life in a playful and fun way. "Children, do you know why jellyfish glow?" she would ask groups of young visitors. "Why?" the other children would respond, fascinated. "Because they're talking. They speak with light instead of using words like we do." "And what do they say?" "They talk about food, about dangers, about friends, just like us, only prettier." The children were always enchanted by Hope's explanations, and the parents were moved, seeing how she could spark scientific interest in other little ones. "Emily, Hope has a gift for teaching," observed Amber after a particularly successful presentation. "She takes after Grandma Helen, who was always good at explaining complicated things simply, and the charisma of Grandpa Frank, who can captivate any audience. Not to forget Mom Rachel's organization and Mama's scientific curiosity," added Brian. "She's a mix of all of us," agreed Emily. "And she's developing her own traits too." Indeed, Hope had developed a unique sensitivity to environmental issues. By age 5, she was already concerned about trash on beaches, became sad when she saw hurt animals, and always asked how she could help protect the ocean. "Mama, why do some people throw trash on the beach?" she asked one day, after seeing plastic bottles in the sand. "Because they haven't learned yet that the ocean is home to many little creatures," replied Emily. "And what if we teach them?" "How would you do that?" "I could bring them here to meet the jellyfish. When you get to know the little creatures, it makes you sad to see them hurt." Hope's suggestion led to the creation of a new program for the project, beach cleanup events combined with environmental education. "Hope, your idea is very good," said Frank. "Let's organize a special day to clean the beach and then show people how trash affects marine animals." "And can I help explain?" "Of course you can. You'll be our little teacher." The first cleanup was a success. More than 50 people participated, including families with children, university students, and local residents. Hope coordinated the children's group, teaching them to identify different types of trash and explaining how each could harm marine life. "This little bottle cap can be swallowed by a turtle that thinks it's food," she explained, showing a soda cap. "And this plastic bag can suffocate a fish if it tries to eat it," she continued, holding up a bag. "That's why it's important to always throw trash in the bin and recycle what can be recycled." After the cleanup, everyone went to see the research center, where Hope gave her special presentation about jellyfish and marine conservation. "Everyone, these are my jellyfish friends," she said, gesturing toward the aquariums. "They're very delicate and need clean water to live happily. And if the seawater is dirty, they get sick and might not be able to glow anymore," explained Emily, adding to her daughter's words. "That's why each of you is important to protect their home," Hope concluded. The community effort became a monthly event, always with good participation from the community. Hope established herself as a young environmental leader, inspiring other children to become interested in conservation. "Emily, have you thought about Hope's professional future?" asked Rachel one day. "It's still too early for that. She might change interests many times before she grows up. But it's undeniable that she has a talent for communication and leadership. Yes, and a natural connection with environmental issues. But I want her to grow up free to choose her own path, just like your father let you choose," Rachel teased. "Touché. But in the end, he accepted my choices and even participated in them. What if Hope chooses something completely different from marine biology? Then we'll support her. What matters is that she grows up knowing she has a family that loves her unconditionally." When Hope turned 6, the family organized a themed party at the research center. The theme, chosen by the birthday girl herself, was Lights of the Sea. They decorated the space with blue lights that mimicked bioluminescence, created educational games about marine life, and even made a jellyfish-shaped cake. "Hope, what did you enjoy learning most this year?" asked Helen during the party. "I liked learning that there are other little creatures that glow in the sea, not just jellyfish." "Like what?" "There's plankton that makes the water glow when we stir it. There are fish that look like lanterns, and there's even shrimp that blink." "And you want to meet all of them?" "I do, all of. And I want to teach other children about them too." "Why do you like teaching?" Hope thought for a moment before answering, with the seriousness typical of children when they talk about things important to them. "Because when people know about the little sea creatures, they want to protect them. And if everyone protects them, the little creatures will be happy. And if the little creatures are happy, the sea is happy too, and a happy sea is good for everyone." The simplicity and depth of Hope's answer moved all the adults present. At 6 years old, she had grasped the essence of environmental education. Knowledge generates empathy, and empathy generates conservation action. "Hope, you're very wise for such a little girl," said Mrs. Dorothy. "Grandpa Frank says the sea teaches wisdom to those who pay attention." "And do you pay attention?" "I do. Every day I listen to what the sea is saying." "And what does it say?" "Today it said it's happy, because many people came here to learn about its little creatures." The party continued with presentations by the invited children who had prepared drawings and little plays about marine life, inspired by their visits to the project. Seeing other children engaging with environmental themes because of Hope's influence filled the whole family with pride and hope. "Frank, do you think our granddaughter will change the world?" asked Helen at the end of the party. "I think she's already changing it, one person at a time." "How so?" "Every child who leaves here interested in protecting the sea is a seed planted, and Hope is helping to plant many seeds. And when those children grow up, they'll teach their children too. That's how environmental awareness spreads, from generation to generation." Helen looked at her granddaughter, who was playing with the other children near the aquariums, all fascinated by the glowing jellyfish. "Who would have thought all this started with a family argument? And with a lost jellyfish," added Frank. "Do you think it was a coincidence?" "I don't know, Helen, but if it was the best coincidence of my life." They watched the children, wondering what the world would be like when they grew up. With environmental education from an early age, perhaps Hope's generation would be able to solve problems that their generation had created. "Frank, do you regret anything?" "I regret missing 5 years of Emily's life. But if that hadn't happened, maybe we would never have created this project. So it was necessary. I think everything happens in its own time. I needed to mature to accept Emily's choices. She needed to grow stronger to trust me again. And Hope came at the right time to bring us together for good. And now we keep learning and teaching. The sea still has many secrets to share with us." 2 years later, when Hope was 8 years old, Project Hope received national recognition as a model of sustainable scientific tourism. The award came with a documentary about the initiative. "Hope, would you like to be in the documentary?" asked the director. "Can I talk about the jellyfish?" "You can talk about anything you want. Then I'll tell how they taught me that every living creature is important." During filming, Hope was natural and articulate. She explained bioluminescence, spoke about the importance of marine conservation, and shared stories about her connection with the jellyfish. "Hope, what is your dream for the future?" asked the filmmaker. "I want all the children in the world to meet the little sea creatures and learn to protect them." "And how do you plan to do that?" "By teaching, just like my family taught me, and maybe by writing books or making videos, or inventing other ways to spread knowledge." "Do you already know what profession you want when you grow up?" "I want to be like my family, doing things that help the sea and people at the same time." "Is that a profession?" "Grandpa says that when you do what you love to help the world, anything can become a profession." The documentary aired nationally and brought even more recognition to the project. They received invitations to expand the methodology to other coastal regions of the United States. "Should we accept?" asked Emily during a family meeting. "It depends," replied Frank. "If it's to help other families connect with the sea and with each other, I'm in. If it's just to make money, I'm not interested." "And how do we tell the difference?" "We'll get to know the people behind the invitations. If they truly care about conservation and education, it could be a good partnership." "What about Hope? Can she travel with us to help with new projects?" "Only if she wants to, and if it doesn't interfere with her studies." "I want to," said Hope, who had overheard the conversation. "I want to see other seas and other little creatures." They ended up accepting 3 invitations to expand Project Hope, one on the coast of Southern California, one in the Florida Keys, and one in Miami. Each new project would be adapted to local characteristics, but would maintain the basic principles, combining traditional and scientific knowledge, involving the local community, and providing accessible environmental education. The first trip was to Southern California, where they met a fishermen's cooperative that had noticed changes similar to those observed in Long Beach. "Mr. Frank, is it true that you can predict the weather just by looking at the sea?" asked Peter, a local fisherman in his 60s. "It's not just by looking at the sea, Mr. Peter. It's by observing everything: the clouds, the birds, the behavior of the fish, the direction of the wind." "And how did you learn that?" "From my father, who learned from his father, who learned from his father. It's knowledge passed down from generation to generation." "And now you're mixing that with science?" "We're not mixing it. We're proving that our knowledge is science too, just applied for much longer." The exchange of experiences between fishermen from different regions was rich and enlightening. Each community had developed unique methods for observing and adapting to local conditions. Hope was fascinated by the regional differences in marine life. In Southern California, she encountered species that didn't exist in Long Beach and learned about different types of bioluminescence. "Mommy, why do the little creatures here glow differently than ours?" she asked. "Because each region has its own characteristics: water temperature, types of food, depth. The animals adapt to these conditions, so they evolve." "Exactly, and it shows how intelligent and flexible nature is." "And can we learn from this intelligence?" "We can and should. The animals teach us about adaptation, collaboration, and sustainability." During their stay in Southern California, Hope gave her first presentation to children from another region. She adapted her explanation about jellyfish to include local species and comparisons with those from Long Beach. "Children, did you know the jellyfish here are cousins of the ones in Long Beach?" she asked. "How so?" replied a local boy. "They're from the same family, but they adapted to live in different waters, like people who are from the same family but live in different cities." "And can they visit each other?" "Yes, they can. Some species migrate and travel long distances through the sea. Like birds, but underwater." The simplicity and clarity of Hope's explanations impressed the local educators. She had developed a natural ability to translate complex scientific concepts into accessible language for children. "Emily, your daughter has a gift," commented the educational coordinator of Southern California. "She's always had an ease for communication, but I think growing up in the project helped develop this skill. Have you ever thought about documenting the teaching methods she uses?" "How so?" "Creating educational material based on how she explains science to other children. It could be useful for teachers across the country." The suggestion planted a seed in Emily's mind. Perhaps it would be possible to create an educational program that combined Hope's natural charisma with rigorous scientific methodology. Back in Long Beach, they implemented improvements based on what they learned in Southern California. They also began developing educational material inspired by Hope's teaching techniques. "Dad, do you think we're on the right path?" asked Emily during a walk on the beach. "I think we're doing exactly what that first jellyfish wanted us to do." "What do you think it wanted?" "For us to reconnect, with me and with you, but also with the sea and with our community. And did we succeed?" "Emily, today I have a relationship with you that's better than when you were a child. I have a granddaughter who's the light of my life. I work with something I love that makes a difference in the world. If that isn't success, I don't know what is. And you're no longer bothered by the fact that I'm with Rachel. It doesn't bother me. In fact, today I understand that you two are perfect for each other. Rachel completes you in a way I never could as a father. Thank you for changing, Dad. Thank you for giving me the chance to change." They walked in silence for a few minutes, watching the waves break on the sand. It was a golden late afternoon with the sun approaching the horizon. "Dad, look!" exclaimed Emily, pointing to the water. A lone jellyfish swam near the shore, its bioluminescence beginning to become visible in the twilight. It was similar to the first one Frank had encountered 2 years earlier. "Do you think it's a descendant of our first jellyfish?" asked Emily. "Could be, or it could be a new messenger coming to remind us that our mission isn't over yet." "What mission?" "To keep learning, teaching, and connecting people with the sea." The jellyfish remained visible for a few minutes, pulsing its blue light like a beacon in the golden sea. Then it dove back into the depths, leaving only waves and sun reflections. "Hope will be sad she missed this," commented Emily. "No, she won't. She always says jellyfish appear when we need to see them most. And do you think we needed to see it today? I think it came to remind us that our story is still being written." When they got home, they found Hope in the backyard, humming to the jellyfish in the aquariums. All of them pulsed in sync with her melody, creating a coordinated light show. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Grandpa," she greeted without stopping her humming. "Hi, my dear granddaughter. What are you singing to them?" "A song I made up about the sea. They like it when I sing." "How do you know they like it?" "Because they glow brighter and swim happier." Emily and Frank exchanged glances, still amazed by the unique connection Hope had developed with the marine creatures. "Hope, did you see a jellyfish at the beach earlier?" asked Emily. "Yes, I did. It came to say goodbye before its trip." "Trip to where?" "To teach other people about the sea, just like we do." "How do you know that?" "It told me, in the way jellyfish do." "And what way is that?" "With lights and feelings. We feel in our hearts what they're saying." Frank knelt beside his granddaughter and looked into her bright eyes. "Hope, you have a very special gift." "What gift?" "The gift of understanding the language of the sea and of teaching others to understand too." "Can everyone learn?" "Everyone can try, but you have a natural talent." "Then I'll teach as many people as I can. And we'll help you." That night, during family dinner, they planned the next steps for the project. There were invitations to expand to other regions, educational partnership proposals, and ideas for new programs. "The important thing is not to lose sight of our core values," warned Rachel. "What are our core values?" asked Hope. "Respect for nature, family unity, accessible education, and valuing traditional knowledge," answered Emily. "And love," added Hope. "Everything we do is with love." "You're right," agreed Helen. "Love for family, love for the sea, love for knowledge." "And love for the people who visit our project," completed Frank. "And love for the jellyfish," concluded Hope, making everyone laugh. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and family reunion through a simple bioluminescent jellyfish. Do you believe small signs from nature can change our lives? Share in the comments your experiences with family reconciliations or special moments involving nature. Don't forget to like if the story moved you and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories like this one.